Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, our Saturday debate show, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We're on Mac's Sports Facebook page and Northeast Streaming Sports Facebook page. The Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel, also on Twitter and Instagram. Like, share, comment, please subscribe to the Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel. For all the great NESSP shows, our website is nessp.info. Check it out. Shows, info, and a little bit of information on all of our special guests such as the doctor this morning. I'm Mac with your co-host, Jack Hirsch, legendary boxing writer and former president of the National Boxing Writers Association, bringing you national sports with special focus on Northeast professional sports from New York, Boston, and Philly. And joining us today, Jack, is one of our favorite guests every Saturday, Dr. Paul Semendinger. How you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. So we got a few things to get to before we get to our debate. We do a lot of different things, especially with Doc, who writes. He's the founder and creator of the Start Spreading the News blog, an incredible site, folks, for Yankees information. Although Doc is very well versed on all Major League Baseball, he's unbelievable with his knowledge. So we love having him on. He's also an award-winning author of the book Scattering the Ashes, and he has more books coming. Plus, he's a principal at a school. Plus, he's married. The man is busy as heck, but yet he gives us some time on Saturday morning, and we appreciate that, Doc.
Oh, I appreciate you guys.
Okay, so let's start with our sports updates before we get to our debates and the other stuff. In the NHL, Chicago beat Tampa 4-3 in a shootout. The Wild won over the Coyotes 5-1. Avalanche beat the Ducks 3-2. The Blues over the Kings 3-2. The Knights harpoon the Sharks 5-4. Locally, Jack, the Bruins dominate the Capitals. For the Bruins, Marchand had 2 goals. Bergeron, Frederick, and Ritchie each had a goal apiece.
Well, the last couple of games, the Bruins feel the Capitals have been taking cheap shots at them. One of the Bruin players was taken by ambulance to the hospital yesterday. And the Bruins rallied, after that so-called cheap shot. They put together, 5 goals and marched to victory there. But there was an emotional game, and the Bruins complained after the game so we have a little bit of a rivalry now going there with the Washington Capitals and Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with the matchups, Jack. It seems like the Bruins always are beating the Flyers. The Flyers beat, another team. I mean, the matchups right now in the East are great, and this just adds to it with this rivalry between Boston and the Capitals now. So, it's going to be real fun for the rest of the year. Mark Pavelich, star of the Miracle on Ice team, was found dead last night or this morning, Jack, and his death is still unknown.
It's tragic, but he was undergoing reportedly mental health issues, and he was in a home for that. And reportedly, his sister said he just wasn't the same gentle person he was earlier. And they think it could be related to his hockey days. Mark Pavelich also, not only being a member of that famous USA hockey team, the Miracle on Ice in 1980, he played 6 years in the NHL, 5 for the New York Rangers. And reportedly, he had his good share of concussions and then paid a price for it late on in life. He was only 63. And it's really tragic when you think of it. And this concussion, it really has to be diagnosed and dealt with. I know the NFL is making efforts to deal with it. I'm not sure to what extent hockey is. But it's a problem in sports that's got to be dealt with. In the past, I don't have to tell you guys, if someone's head hurt, they had a collision, they'd be asked to go back in the game because it would be considered a sign of weakness to sit out. but we know so much more now, and really we have to monitor these things carefully. And Mark Pavlich is a perfect example of that.
Jack, I am all for the physicality of football and hockey. I think that they've gone to extreme in certain cases, but I agree with the concussion issue where people are, especially at the youth level. I know in a high school game when I played, I got knocked out in the second quarter, and I didn't know what happened I was still playing. I was out there playing. And the second half, at the halftime break, I kind of started coming to, and I didn't even know what the score was. So,
wow, yeah,
it is something that they got to look at, and especially at the youth level where they aren't teaching some of the basics the way they taught even when I was in youth sports, the proper way to tackle, the proper way to check. I mean, there's ways to do it without really getting hurt badly. Anyway, you're going to get hurt in a physical sport. Including, boxing, football, anything like even soccer. I mean, they've had a lot of by heading the ball, they've had some concussions. So something they got to work on, and hopefully they get that under control down there. A famous, I guess he's famous. He was with ESPN. Skip Bayless, the original when he used to do the First Take. I think it was with Steve Smith. He was the original guy on there. He's reportedly, Jack, he's signed a contract with Fox Sports for $8 million a year. Is that?
Hey, listen, compared to Tony Romo's $18 million to be an analyst for CBS, that's not massive. Skip Bayless tries to get on controversial issues. He tries to play devil's advocate all the time, kind of the way we're doing on the debate today. But Skip Bayless will take things to an extreme. He's going to bring up topics to get controversy, and sometimes he's going to go a little too far, in my opinion. Like with Zach Prescott was talking about certain emotional issues that he had, and Skip Bayless was saying he shouldn't say that because that shows he can't be a strong leader at quarterback, and that got groups after Skip Bayless. And when Derek Jeter was having a bit of a resurgence with the Yankees late on in his career, Skip Bayless just brought up the topic where he wondered whether or not Derek Jeter was on steroids. He tries to stir the pot more or less, Skip Bayless. And I know Troy Aikman hates his guts, because when Skip Bayless worked in Dallas, he put out the word that Troy Aikman, in his opinion, was gay, and Troy Aikman didn't appreciate that, okay? Yeah. That being put out there, and whether Troy Aikman was or wasn't, who cares? But The point is, Troy Aikman said he wasn't, and he just didn't like the idea of that coming up in conversation, and it's no one's business how Troy Aikman would have lived his personal life one way or another, and why was Skip Bayless even going there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do that, as you know, Jack, to be controversial just to get ratings.
That's it.
Whether they hate you or love you, they'll listen.
That's it. They want to get people talking. Mac, we got to get a little better at stuff like that. Just get people talking. No, we'll keep it cleaner though. We'll keep it clean.
I agree. Just to say something sometimes. I mean, there's nothing wrong with needling each other back and forth a little bit, but to talk about somebody's sexual.
You can't get too. Listen, in the news too. I'm not sure whether this was going to be in your news update. Kevin Garnett, who was a former great player for the Minnesota Timberwolves, then he went to the Boston Celtics and won an NBA title. Then ended his career with the Nets. He headed a group that tried to buy the Minnesota Timberwolves, and if that had happened, Kevin Garnett would have ran the operations, which would have been a good thing because it would have allowed an African American man to head an NBA team. But it kind of fell through. But something about Kevin Garnett, to me, he wasn't the best example, him individually, only in the sense he trash talked on the court, he took it to another level. He got way too personal. And after one game against Carmelo Anthony's team with the Knicks, Carmelo Anthony went into the Timberwolf locker room looking to fight with Kevin Garnett because he said things that struck too much of a personal, too much of a personal chord. And you don't do that. I mean, trash talking's one thing. You want to get someone off their game, but you can't do that. I heard a case in baseball once with the great Dick Young, who was a columnist for the Daily News all the years. When they had that Yankee controversy with Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich years ago with the wife swapping thing, he said players on the other teams are going to go to any length to get you off their game. A player once had a child that was had issues with, I'm not sure the exact term, but had issues, the child. And the player on the opposing team was yelling out to that player, "Oh, your kid is retarded," mean-spirited things that had no business being said because he was trying to throw him off his game. But there's certain lines you should never cross. I don't care how competitive it is, how much you want to win, how much of a little edge it could give you. Certain things have to be kept off limits.
Well said. So there was some news about, we talked about the J.J. Watt signing with the Cardinals. A lot of executives, guys, are saying who the Cardinals were bidding against is a mystery because there was no other team that was going to give J.J. Watt that sort of money. For that offer to come across the table, of course, he is going to be a guaranteed Hall of Famer, but he's kind of, he's been injured a lot. His play isn't as good as it was when he was in his prime and uninjured. And, a lot of the executives are just scratching their heads, trying to figure out why the Cards bidded so high when no other team was going to do that.
I'm not that sure that's accurate. I mean, teams come in late in the process when they have a need. Look at baseball. Jackie Bradley Jr. a couple of days ago, he got a nice 2-year deal, not massive, but that's about what he was worth, about $12 million a year for 2 years. Who was bidding against Milwaukee? But Milwaukee wanted him bad enough at that point and didn't want to take a chance. But it was very late in the process. And if the Cardinals didn't sign J.J. Watt to that deal, what happens if another team came in with close to that and J.J. Watt all of a sudden is thinking, oh, I want to go to Cleveland, I want to go to Green Bay, I want to go to Buffalo. They didn't want to take a chance. Sometimes it's better to lock someone up, a little bit early in the process and not wait for the competition to come out in force.
Well, Jack, you could always match offers, but I'm telling you, there are executives from the Steelers and other teams that seemed interested in J.J. Watt said there was no way they were going to offer that guy that kind of money. So they're just wondering, what was the purpose of doing that, of locking him up at around 15 mil when nobody was even going to get close to that.
He had $23 million is guaranteed. I think he signed for $35 million for 2 years. $23 million is guaranteed. It's not for someone of J.J. Watt's caliber. $11.5 million a year. It isn't massive. It really isn't massive.
$35 million, Jack, over 2 years is a lot more.
23 million is guaranteed, and
right.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's worth taking that chance on J.J. Watt just for the leadership, the culture he brings in the locker room. Listen, J.J. Watt is so highly respected, and he's the type of player who could be very helpful to the coaching staff because if he buys in, he's a loud presence, in the locker room.
Yeah, Jack.
And he's not at the end. Listen, he's not at the end of the line. You know what this makes me think of, but in a different way? At the end of his career, the Cleveland Indians signed Keith Hernandez. Keith Hernandez had nothing left in the tank, and they said they were getting Keith Hernandez for the leadership. They said, we know we're overpaying, but we're getting him for the leadership he's providing. And I remember thinking this is completely bogus because that leadership, him going to the Indians, is going to be overrated. But in football, I think leadership is a lot more important, than in baseball, certainly. Okay? I mean, leadership is so important in that locker room because it's not as much of an individual sport. All the pieces have to run in cohesion. And I think it's a good thing by Arizona. Did they overpay slightly? Perhaps, but I don't think it's outrageous by any means.
Well, I guess we'll agree to disagree, Jack. I think that's way too much.
I think sometimes when teams make these big deals, they're also sending a message to the rest of the team. They're sending a message to the fan base. They say we're trying to go for it. Football, unlike a lot of other sports, with a short schedule, you could turn a season around. You can get to the playoffs. One player can make a big difference. And I think I think there's so much money. You're just talking about Skip Bayless making so much money just to be a commentator. And Tony Romo making more than 2 times that
18 million,
to be a commentator. I think the amount of money that's in sports is so overwhelming that for us on the outside, we go, they're giving them 15 million a year or 23 million guaranteed over 2 years. It sounds like so much, and nobody was going to even come near that. But I think for these guys, millions is oftentimes small potatoes. All of a sudden, teams come out and they can spend just look what the Padres did with Fernando Tatis Jr., right? He hasn't even played 160 games in his major league career, and they signed him to $340 million. And they're saying, that might be a good deal someday, and he might be underpaid someday, and maybe he is.
Yeah.
But if you can invest that kind of money in a player who, of course, is a tremendous upside, it might be the superstar of the sport for the next 10 or 15 years. But if you can do that this early in his career and not even blink an eye, while also still paying, Manny Machado and some other guys big money, it just tells you how awash these teams are in cash.
But I'm going to tell you, Doc, you have to project how the guy is going to do towards the end of the contract. I said on a past show, I'm a believer. You got to get value for every year of the contract. I don't want to hear you sign a guy to a 10-year contract and say, well, if he gives me 7 good years, I'm happy. Look at the Robinson Cano contract. The Yankees offered him a fair deal, $7 million, $25 million a year. Okay, and he turned it down. The Yankees didn't want to go to 10 years. The Yankees were smart because this would have been this year had Robinson Cano had not had the steroid issues. This would have been his 8th year in the contract. In the last couple of years, he wasn't anywhere close to the $25 million a year guy, but he was still productive. But imagine the Yankees signed him to a 10-year deal and he wasn't on the steroids. He would have had this year and 2 more years. And what are you going to do with him? I guess you would have kept him at second base. His range wasn't going to be the same. You really got to be careful, I think, with these long-term deals. Like when the Yankees signed Derek Jeter to the 10-year deal, he was 25 years old. If you're very young, it's worth it. But if you're getting on in years later, like Albert Pujols, he's not the same player towards the end of the contract. It's just not good value. But it's the temptation at the front of the contract where people get consumed and make the mistake in signing the player like Giancarlo Stanton. 59 home runs, you're getting a superstar and you don't have to give up anything for him. It was Broadway when they got Giancarlo Stanton. We were so excited, him and Aaron Judge together. Now we have 7 more years of Giancarlo Stanton. It might still work out. It might still.
But you know what?
World championship. Yeah.
This is why I like what the Dodgers did with Trevor Bauer. If I were an executive, I would overpay for the shorter term contract, and then you're rid of these guys at the back ends. I mean, I think that's the problem. Like you're saying, you have these guys making all this money at the back end. So J.J. Watt, what was he signed for 2 years?
Yeah.
You pay a lot. You have him play. He provides leadership. He can be a difference maker. And the next thing you know, maybe he helps you win, but if he doesn't, he's gone in 2 years, and you're not paying this unbelievable contract, which is tying your hands for the next 8-10 years.
Right. But you mentioned Trevor Bauer, J.J. Watt. There's a distinct difference. The Dodgers are a championship team. Trevor Bauer is going to be the highest paid player the next 2 years if he accepts the option for next year as well. He's getting $40 million this year, then he get $45 million next year. Highest paid player in Major League history. If he acts like a clown, tweeting and everything, antagonizes players on his own team, think of the resentment, what that's going to do to the team with the money he's getting. And they're thinking, we're already world champions. We didn't need this guy. I mean, it's going to tear the team apart.
Well, it can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not actually talking about Trevor Bauer, the person. I'm talking about the idea of paying a lot of money.
Right.
Hey, that happened with the Yankees, right? When they signed Reggie, they were like, "We just made it to the World Series. We don't need Reggie," and that was some of the resentment. And then Reggie, of course, with some of the comments he made, the straw that stirs the drink, and all that. But that was some of the Yankees' feelings. I think they wanted Joe Rudi. They didn't think they needed another superstar on that team.
Now, wait. This is a debate for another time. If I'm not mistaken, Doc. Reggie has a plaque in what's it called? Legends
Monument
Field?
Park.
Monument Park. I'm sorry. Greg Nettles, does he have a plaque in Monument Park?
Oh boy, you just went into my wheelhouse. I've written articles about this. There's actually a chapter in my new book about this, that the Yankees have no third baseman in their whole history in Monument Park. None of them, including Nettles.
The
reason there's absolutely no reason why Greg Nettles shouldn't be in Monument Park. Absolutely, he belongs out there. We should have a 4-hour telecast campaigning for Greg Nettles to be in Monument Park.
I think the 77-78 team is kind of been forgotten in a way by Yankee fans, and because of the later Yankee teams that came up winning the 5 World Series. So when you think of it, that team has been lost in time in a sense. I mean, no Greg Nettles. He had more home runs than Reggie Jackson when Reggie Jackson came over to the Yankees the first year. And his defense obviously was far more valuable. I could say Greg Nettles was one of the top 5 defensive third basemen in baseball history. I could make that argument.
Me too.
Doc, can't hear you.
And Nettles, Nettles was definitely the home run leader when Jackson was there, and I think he tied him the second year or something like that. So he provided a lot of power for the Yankees. I was at one of the games when he hit a 3-run shot, so I know that, especially in that short right field porch, he was awesome. So, guys, let's get to the as we sift through the contracts and people getting paid way too much money. I don't care what anybody says. Let's get to some of our poll questions here, and let's start off with the Yankees if we can. Yes, sir. So every week, ladies and gentlemen, we go out and we test the Yankee fan groups and ask them a question. We poll them to see what their answer would be. And this week's poll was, if you had a chance to spend a weekend with one of these 3 legendary Yankees, who would you choose? So the first choice was Babe Ruth. Of course, Babe Ruth was one of the greatest promoters of sports, period, especially baseball. He had a lot of fun. He partied a little bit, and he was a good time. The second choice was Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle, known for his clubbing and partying, going out with the other players and stuff, showing up to the games with hangovers sometimes. I mean, he had a great time outside the ballpark. And the third choice is very interesting, is Joe DiMaggio. Now, Joe DiMaggio wasn't a great partier, but you would have been around Marilyn Monroe maybe for a weekend and maybe at a couple celebrity parties. So those were the 3 choices that I gave the fans. And starting with you, Jack, who would be your choice in that poll?
Well, to me, it's very easy, and it would be Babe Ruth. And Mickey Mantle was my childhood idol. He was my childhood idol. Mickey Mantle would be at bat. I'd be glued to the TV. I'd think of Mickey Mantle all the time. I would be practically praying he would hit a home run, And I'm even thinking of the Mickey Mantle the last 4 years of his career where he just wasn't the same player, just hanging on. I mean, he was the icon of icons, and younger fans who lived through the Derek Jeter era don't realize Mickey Mantle was even bigger than Derek Jeter. Okay, and Derek Jeter was massively big to face of baseball, but not quite as big as the Mick. But what Mickey Mantle was off the field, I mean, I'm not a drinker, number one, so we wouldn't have gotten along. If I was sitting with him and Billy Martin, it wouldn't work out, okay, at all. And Mickey was just a little too loose for me, you know, to like off the field. Joe DiMaggio, quiet, very defensive, wouldn't let anyone in your world, wouldn't so on. You know how I judge things? I sometimes think if I had to take a car ride cross country and someone had to keep me company and we were just talking the whole time, getting along, you know, who would I want to take the car ride with? I think about things like that once in a while, just for fun. Mantle, no. I mean, he would duck into the latest bar, you know, get a hangover. Joe DiMaggio would be quiet, defensive. It would be the Babe. He would be a jovial, fun guy, joking around. And I feel like be able to ask the Babe questions I couldn't ask the other two. Mickey Mantle, to his credit, and this was a good quality he had, he didn't trash other people. He never trashed anyone, notice. Okay? And he judged himself very objectively as a player. Joe DiMaggio, all I'd have to do is ask him one thing about Marilyn Monroe and I wouldn't exist, okay? Like anyone wouldn't. And but the Babe would be joking. I'd even try to get information out of him. How did you really feel about Lou Gehrig? What really went down between you two, Babe? And I think he would answer. I think I could get answers out of him that maybe no one else got if you were alone with him and really asked the questions. So the Babe was a fun, loving guy who I think I would have a ton of laughs hanging out with, unlike the other two, who are great players, and they had good qualities, Mantle and DiMaggio, as people as well. Don't get me wrong. Not, you know, but they were my type. The Babe was.
Babe Ruth. Okay, go ahead, Doc. What do you got?
I'm like Jack in this one. If I had to pick, I'd probably go out with Tony Kubek and Bobby Richardson. I think those guys were the milkshake twins, right?
Yeah.
But if I had to pick out of those three, I think I would agree with Jack. Babe Ruth had this singular quality, at least that's what we've been told, and that's what we see on the newsreels, that he made everybody feel great and that people just swarmed to him, and he was fun and he was happy, and he did live a wild life. There's no doubt about that. And he did all sorts of crazy things, and the rules didn't apply to him, and the world allowed the rules not to apply to him, and he was the Roaring 20s personified. But I think you're right. Joe DiMaggio would be a great person. If he were your close friend, he would have been a great person to talk to, but he had lots of rules that you had to follow. And Mickey was a partier, but more like a partier, like I'm just going to, I assume, based upon the books I've read and the stories I've heard, where he would hang out with his good friends and they'd go and they'd have a great time and do crazy things. I think Babe Ruth was a more of an inclusive guy, and I think he would have, you know, I don't think there's any stories of Mickey Mantle or Joe DiMaggio really leaving the ballpark and going and playing stickball. I think Babe Ruth would. Like if I said to Babe, hey, let's go out in the backyard and have a catch and play wiffle ball, or hey, will you suit up for my baseball team this week? Yeah. I bet you the Babe would have suited up and he would have played with us.
Yeah, and you know, I agree with both of you. If I had to choose between the three, all three, I would jump at it. It wouldn't matter.
Oh, me too. Yes.
If I had to choose, it definitely would be Babe Ruth. But the polling from the fans was different. They all picked, for the most part, I shouldn't say they all, but the majority picked Mickey Mantle. The second was Ruth, and third was DiMaggio. I don't know, to be able to spend the weekend around Marilyn Monroe might have been very interesting. So, I mean, that would be one thing that might sway me, guys. I don't know.
You wouldn't have been near Marilyn Monroe. Joe would have been with her alone and whatever. You think he'd have you coming along, hanging out? Matt, come on.
Yeah, you never know, Jack. You never know. So our next trivia question.
The Mets, okay.
So there you go, folks. Meet the Mets. we also put a trivia question up in the Mets group, and it was based off the debate me and Jack had last week on which World Series team was the greatest, the 69 Miracle Mets or the 86 World Champion Mets. So I know Jack would have to say the 69 Mets based off his answer, correct, Jack?
Yeah.
And Doc, I'm not sure if you agreed with
No,
me.
I think the 69 Mets last week I said were the more romantic, the greater story, the amazing Mets. But if you had to pick a team that was the better team, I think it's the 86 Mets.
Yes,
If they played each other, the 86 Mets would win.
You know, I argued with Jack about who I thought was the greatest team, but that's not necessarily true because we take the opposite positions. Me, believe it or not, if the 69 Mets met the 86 Mets, I think the 69 Mets might have won that World Series because I liked their pitching staff, even though they had Doc Gooden and all that. I think Tom Seaver, and I can't remember is it Kuzman? I'm trying to remember the other.
Gary Kuzman, yeah.
Kuzman, and with Nolan Ryan in long relief, and they had a pretty good closer there. I believe the 69 Mets might have beaten 4 out of 7. I think it would have won 7. But I really think that the 69 Mets would have beat the 86 Mets in the World Series one time at least. So, but
they won 7 out of 8 in the playoffs. They swept they only played one round. Then they swept the Hank Aaron Braves 3 straight, and then they won 4 out of 5 against the Orioles. They lost the opener and then won 4 in a row. So they won an amazing row.
I agree. And again, it's always that soft spot for the first team to do something. You know, with the 69 Mets, they won that World Series, and they started in 62. So only 7 years later, folks.
I got a trivia question for you guys. That's very hard. Very few people are going to remember and get it right.
Well, let's finish.
I was at the game.
Let's finish up with the poll, Jack. Let's finish up with
the poll, and then you get my.
Then you can do your thing. So, as Doc pointed out, the '86 team was probably better, and the fans agree with Doc that the '86 team was better than the '69 team. They both were significantly voted for, but the '86 Mets did win.
I just want to say one thing: had the Boston Red Sox thrown one more strike, we wouldn't even be discussing this. They would have gone out in 6 games against Boston, the Mets in the World Series, and no one would have said the '86 team was better. Just one strike away. But
but you know what? There's a counter to that. And again, what happened to the '86 Mets, and we talked about this last week, but what happened to them was their success, I think, ruined them in many ways because, you know, you had so many players who had so many different off the field problems, including their superstars, right? Strawberry and Gooden. And if you remember the Yankees in what was it, 97, they lost in the playoffs to the Cleveland Indians, where Mariano Rivera gives up a home run to Sandy Alomar.
Yeah.
And the Yankees then said that loss is what spurred them on to be even better the next year because they hated that feeling. I wonder if the '86 Mets had lost the World Series and they did not become the toast of New York, maybe those players don't have the same things influencing them. They're not the world champions. They're not the greatest players. Maybe they come back with a different philosophy, a different mindset in 1987, and maybe they go on a run. I never thought of that. I never thought of that point, what the mindset would have been, whether complacency, maybe it's set in after they won the World Series. That's a great point. This is a trivia question for you guys that few people are aware of. I was at the game, believe it or not. I was at the game in 1969. In the month of September, a pitcher pitched a no-hitter against the Mets at Shea Stadium during their Miracle Met year. Who is that? This is a hard one. No one ever talks about it, but it's true. Who is that pitcher? I have a guess, but the only thing I can come up with off the top of my head is Milt Pappas, but I don't know if that's right.
Well, not quite. Okay, I'll give you the team, and it's still hard. He pitched for the Pittsburgh Pirates. It was against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Roberto Clemente made a outstanding catch in the outfield, to help preserve the no-hitter. It's a hard one. Bob Moose.
Ooh.
So no one, and so with that storybook team, they actually had a no-hitter. I pitched against them, late in the year. And I remember they lost 3 straight to the Pirates. That was their slump for the year when they won a run. But then they won the next 2 against the Pirates in the 5-game World Series, then continued the amazing run.
Well, what don't surprise me is that the Mets 69 team did not have a very good offense. They were a pitching team. So that really doesn't surprise me too much, Jack, that someone would throw a no-hitter against that offense. I mean, honestly, their offense was not even amongst the best in the league at that time. So it was their pitching staff that did it. So
Gil Hodges platooned everyone. I mean, Ed Charles and Wayne Garrett at third. He platooned J.C. Martin, Jerry Grody at catcher. Eddie Kranepool, Don Clendenin platooned at first base. Al Weiss and, oh boy, I'm forgetting, Ken Boswell platooned at second base. Ron Swoboda and Art Shamsky platooned in right field. The only regulars were Tommy Agee in center and Cleon Jones in left. And they were outstanding. Cleon Jones, very underrated. No offense, Doc, but at Cleon Jones' best, he was better than Roy White, if you want to make a left field comparison. And we love Roy White, but Cleon Jones had star quality. And Agee was coming off an off year before, and in 69, he bounced back. He was a very good version of Aaron Hicks, let's say. When Aaron Hicks is really going well, that was Tommy Agee.
And speaking of trivia, so, guys, this is your Yankee trivia question that we ask every week. Jack went ahead and gave us a Mets trivia question, which I love. That was great, Jack.
Bud Harrelson at shortstop was the other third regular. I'm sorry.
Thank you for stopping me cold, Jack. So,
I have to correct I omitted him, and I don't want a fan to send something in.
I imagine you didn't offend anyone with that, Jack. But anyway,
no one's paying attention to it, Mac.
Anyway, the Yankees trivia question is, Derek Cole had an outstanding performance. He had pitched more than one double-digit strikeout games for the Yankees in the last year or so. But which Yankee pitcher for the franchise holds the record for the most double-digit strikeout performances in one season?
I mean,
So I have two guesses, but I think Jack goes first.
Yeah. I mean, the name that popped into my head first immediately. Sometimes a name just pops into your head for whatever reason. I'm thinking of Ron Guidry in that amazing 78 season. But then you're thinking, wow, but Roger Clemens came on board and he was pretty darn good. And before Ron Guidry, who would have had the most? I'm thinking, was there anyone that great? I mean, Whitey Ford wasn't that type of strikeout pitcher, as I recall. And I'm thinking the other names. No one comes at me, before Ron Guidry. And who comes at me after? Roger Clemens. I mean, he was a strikeout pitcher, much more than Mike Mussina, CC Sabathia. I'm going to go with Ron Guidry. I'm thinking of the 78 season where he was phenomenal. That would be my guess.
Your logic and mine were the exact same. I thought you were going to ask who had the most strikeouts in the game. That was a layup. I thought it was easy. That was going to be Guidry. And then you said who had the most multiple strikeout games in a season. That becomes really hard.
Oh. Keith Engel puts Ali Reynolds down. I mean,
yeah, Ali Reynolds is a good guess, but I don't think Ali Reynolds was as much of a strikeout pitcher like that, and he pitched out of the bullpen a lot too. So I don't know if pitching between starts. So I would think that would have probably cut down on his strikeouts because he probably didn't want to pitch as many throws in the game. Strikeouts, obviously, if you look at the history of baseball, go up There's a lot more strikeouts in the modern day than there were in the olden days. So I think it's got to either be a modern player. So it's either got to be Guidry, Clemens, or the only other guy I could think of would be David Cone, who for a couple of years there was really dominant. So
who's your guess?
I'm gonna go with Guidry.
All right, go with Guidry.
One of your choices were correct, Doc. It was David Cone. He had 9 games.
Well, but Doc gave 4 names out there.
No, 3.
Come on, and you're giving
I gave
Doc
3.
credit for three choices.
Well, no.
It's one and done.
Jack,
No, I went with Guidry. I'm wrong.
Jack, he went with Guidry. You got to listen, Jack. He went with Guidry.
In fairness, I wouldn't have thought of David Cone. I don't image him as being that overpowering strikeout pitcher in the mold that Guidry was in 78 or Clemens later. So in all fairness, Cone wouldn't have been in my top 3. I would have thought of a third choice ahead of Cone.
Well, my choice before I looked up the answer was Ron Guidry. I was going with Ron Guidry too for that 1 year because I remember he did have a lot of multiple strikeout games, but David Cone had 9 in one season. So there you go, folks. So that is the answer to Yankee Trivia. The most consecutive strikeout games in one season goes to David Cone. So that's very interesting.
Right. Very good questions. Hard question to get.
It has to be hard to get, Doc. And I said, this one looks good because Doc would think Ron Guidry. He might think Roger Clemens. He might even think Mike Mussina, even though he's not a big strikeout power pitcher. He did have a lot of junk and didn't strike out a lot of people. So
I wouldn't have thought David Cone. I mean, would have held that record. Yeah.
I should have went with Cone. That was
you thought of him at least, and we didn't think of him.
So guys, let's get to our first debate topic here. And, let's see.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Anything you can be, I can be greater. Sooner or later, I'm greater than you.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
So, folks, every Saturday, me and Jack debate past, present topics, all kinds of different sports topics we debate. For our first topic is, should the owner of the Yankees, former owner of the Yankees, George Steinbrenner, be in the Hall of Fame? And Jack, you go first.
Oh, the answer is absolutely. Absolutely, no question about it. Listen, George Steinbrenner is the most famous owner in the history of baseball. You could say Charles Finley is in that league, but no one was more famous as an owner than George Steinbrenner, and it's called the Hall of Fame. So fame, being famous, has a lot to do with it. George Steinbrenner was always in the news. Always in the news all the time. And he turned the Yankee fortunes around. When he bought the team from CBS, the team was a chronic loser. Then they started to win under George Steinbrenner. Fans complain. Owners don't spend money to get players. George did whatever it took. He opened up the pocketbook. He spent money. He was willing to lose money. Now, if you talk about a popularity contest, George Steinbrenner was despised while he was owner of the Yankees because the people thought of themselves as the common man. They're on a job, they're working, and they thought of him as being a bullying type boss. That was their image of him. And sometimes he would be that, but sometimes he'd be very kind and compassionate and go overboard in a kind way as well. I mean, Doc, you could relate. When I was a teacher, okay, I once wanted to play devil's advocate. I was a phys ed teacher, and some of the guys in the department were talking about the principal. He should do this, he should do that. So all of a sudden I say playing devil's advocate, and they don't know I'm playing devil's advocate. I remember this. What we need is a principal just like George Steinbrenner. He get things done. They jumped all over me. Are you out of your mind? He would come into the gym while you're there, look at you, point to you and go, you're fired, and storm out if he saw something for 1 second he didn't like, okay? And that's how George Steinbrenner was. You might not like his personality. He'd be very impulsive, but look, he put baseball in the news all the time. The tabloids loved him. He built the sport that way. Compare him to other people in the Hall of Fame who are non-participants. They didn't contribute nearly what George Steinbrenner did, and they're in the Hall of Fame. Let's link up sports. Who's a famous owner in the NFL? Jerry Jones, right? Jerry Jones is in the NFL Hall of Fame, and he's still an active owner. And he's the closest thing as an owner to being like George Steinbrenner, being on the news, images. But George Steinbrenner, on balance, was more successful, having winners with the Yankees than Jerry Jones, has been with the Cowboys. Listen, he ruled with an iron hand. Compare George Steinbrenner to his family, Hal Steinbrenner. Hal Steinbrenner, I think, has done a decent job as owner of the New York Yankees. But I'm going to tell you something. If George Steinbrenner was owning the New York Yankees right now, Trevor Bauer would be a Yankee, Realmuto would be a Yankee. Maybe he would have been the one to get Francisco Lindor. He would have done some really big things. And I'm not criticizing Hal Steinbrenner. I'm not doing it at all. They did sign Garrett Cole last year. So they do make big moves. And George Steinbrenner is going to go the extra mile to get things done. And basically, let me sum up. Just compare his impact, okay, to other non-participants who are in the Hall of Fame. Compare his impact and what he meant. And I feel, you just have to put him in. You have to give him his due, whether you like him or not.
Well, Jack, besides George Steinbrenner, who other owner is in the Baseball Hall of Fame right now?
I don't know. Doc, maybe you could help.
I was looking that up as you guys were talking. Charles Comiskey, but he was inducted in 1939. I believe.
Charles Comiskey, wait. Doc, the owner of the Black Sox who threw the World Series is in the Hall of Fame. Okay.
Barney Dreyfuss. I think he was I think he owned the Dodgers at one point. You have Pat Gillick, who was inducted in 2011, but he was just a GM.
A GM, he's not an owner. Yeah,
correct. I'm just looking. Yeah. Walter O'Malley is in there.
Walter O'Malley, who broke the borough's hearts, the most hated owner for moving the team out of Brooklyn, is in the Hall of Fame.
Branch Rickey, but I don't think he really owned the Dodgers.
Wasn't an owner, no.
Jacob Rupert, Yankee owner.
Okay.
John Schulholz, I think he was more of an executive. I don't think he owned a team. Right. Bill Veeck is there. And Tom Yawkey.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom Yawkey was loved for all he did for charity. Everyone loved Tom Yawkey. But did he have more of an impact with the Red Sox than Steinbrenner did with the Yankees? I mean, the Yankees owned the Red Sox during, Yawkey's time.
Jack, I think that if you put owners in the Hall of Fame, that of course George Steiner should be there. The thing that I question is, how do you put him in the Hall of Fame? Do you put him in as part of the team, or do you just put him in there as an owner? Because in my opinion, really the owners don't have as much to do with the team or the running of the team as a GM does, or as a coach does, or as a manager does, or a player does. I mean, if you're just going to talk about spending money to get a team, anybody could really do that. It's the GM, it's the coach, it's the manager, it's the players that you get that decide whether that the team is that good, or that player based off his stats in the game, or that manager based off his wins, or the GM based off the wins underneath the GM. What does the owner really do with the game of baseball? I mean, really, if you're going to talk about famous, you could say almost anybody in baseball that, made a catch a fan could be in the Hall of Fame, I guess. If you're going to talk about fame and baseball, to me, I think George Steinbrenner should be in the Hall of Fame, but I don't know what in what capacity. I really don't think
non-participant.
Well, listen, let me finish, Jack. Like I let you finish. So now, a non-participant. Are we talking about a baseball writer that covers the base? Doesn't he have more to do with bringing the game to the people than an owner does? I mean, George Steinbrenner doesn't write about the team. He doesn't broadcast the team. He's not really, he may have a little involvement behind the scenes, but responsibility of putting that team together as the manager, and the reporters and television broadcasters are the one that bring the game to the fans. So you say they're a non-participant. I don't think they're a non-participant at all. I think that these people are responsible for the players and their fame. The owner really doesn't do that. So if you're going to put owners in the Hall of Fame, which I don't necessarily think they should have a picture or a statue of themselves in there, they should be definitely mentioned. And I believe George Steinbrenner is mentioned a lot in the Hall of Fame for the teams and stuff. The only thing I have a problem with, Jack, is the whole general idea that an owner should be in the Hall of Fame by himself at all.
I'll respond after Doc. I want to hear Doc's viewpoint, and I'm going to respond. And
Right,
I'm going to have a simple
so they
question.
have a category in the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame, called executives, and that's what I was reading from. And that's where you see these general managers, you see Marvin Miller, other people who influence the game. You see the commissioners that are in the Hall of Fame are listed in that executive category. Does George Steinbrenner rank with those people? And is his success along equal to or greater than most of those people as an owner? Yes. So, but if you were to say to me, who do you want in the Hall of Fame? Would you rather see a guy like Greg Nettles get in the Hall of Fame, who's close, believe it or not, or Thurman Munson, or Buck O'Neil, who was a true contributor to the game and in so many different ways? I'd rather see those guys in than George Steinbrenner. But does George Steinbrenner, based upon the body of his work as the owner, the fact that he did spend the money to bring in championships to the Yankees and bring New York back as a great franchise? Absolutely. So if that's the question, then he does belong in there.
Now, I'm talking about non-participants. I'm not comparing them to play. I'd rather see Buck O'Neil and Greg Nettles going ahead of George Steinbrenner. But let me say just 2 quick points. One of the owners who's in the Hall of Fame, who we don't think of as an owner, is Bud Selig. He's in the Hall of Fame.
He's in there as the commissioner.
And Bud Selig, after being an owner, he was commissioner who oversaw the steroid era. So it's an absolute disgrace. What was he put in the Hall of Fame for exactly? It couldn't have been as a commissioner, I hope, overseeing the steroid issues of being an owner of the Milwaukee Brewers. I mean, come on. Let me ask you guys this, both of you. Think carefully, give me an honest answer. George Steinbrenner wanted to buy the Cleveland Indians. That's who he tried to buy before he bought the New York Yankees. Had that gone through and he bought the Indians, would the Cleveland Indians, who haven't won a World Series since when, since before I was even born, would they have won a World Series, in your opinion, by now had George Steinbrenner been able to buy the Cleveland Indians? Yes, answer me that question first. Yes or no? Do you think they'd have at least one World Series title now?
Yes.
Yes.
Matt? Yes. Okay, now the second question. Had he bought the Indians and just anyone else bought the Yankees, we don't know for sure. You think the Yankees would have had the level of success and all, the World Series titles? They had what? 6, 7 World Series championships under Steinbrenner. Would they have had all those championships?
No.
And that's the answer, I think.
I mean, I can't honestly answer that because I don't know if there would have been another rich guy that came in that was like, say, a Steve Cohen that might have done something like that. So honestly, Jack,
maybe, but he signed Goose Gossage, went out on the limb. You signed Reggie Jackson, went out on the limb. He kept his core players, paid Bernie Williams when push came to shove. Catfish Hunter, he did what he had to do, and push came to shove, and I just feel he was a difference maker, George Steinbrenner. But I wouldn't have wanted to work for him.
There's no bigger fan of George Steinbrenner than me, Jack, because I went through all those terrible years with the Yankees. I wasn't, old enough to remember them when they were great. So there's no bigger fan of George Steinbrenner than me. I don't care if he was a mean guy or not. He got the job done. The only thing I question is what is the owner's place in the Hall of Fame? And that's the only thing that I question, whether a baseball owner by himself should be in the Hall of Fame or not, when it really should be people that either play manage or they make the game famous by covering it. And that's the only question I got. If there is a class for the owners, Steinbrenner should be on top to me, Jack. So how's that?
Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough on that. But I'm just thinking of his impact.
Oh yeah,
He's an
No doubt
impact
about
in baseball history. Yeah.
No doubt about that. So, folks, let's take our first break, and we'll be back about intentional walks. That'll be our next topic of debate. So stick with us, folks. We'll be right back after these messages.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Infoline. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
How come?
Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's gonna be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he gonna know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it though, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're on live Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, legendary boxing writer Jack Hirsch, and our special guest today is Dr. Paul Semendinger, creator, founder, writer in the Start Spreading the News Yankee blog. Anybody that's out there that's listening right now, do yourselves a favor. If you like the Yankees or if you just like any kind of major league sports updates and stuff, they do that over there too. Check out that blog at Start Spreading the News. And again, Dr. Paul is a great writer. He's won an award, and he's writing another book, and I think it's on its way to being published, or it is published by now. And no, not yet, Doc, but you're working on it. A very busy man who does a lot of great things. Principal of a school, and he's a great man and a great guest, and we love having him on. So we're back to our debate.
Mac, you got to promote our 50th anniversary show tomorrow. You haven't done it yet.
We will, Jack. And near the end of the show, like I always do, we will do that, Jack. So
you guys have been on the air for 50 years already. That's amazing.
Yes, we have. Yeah, we were a lot better looking and younger then, too, Doc. So
time flies, because I remember the first one. It's amazing. It was like yesterday.
Yes,
we're still playing in the independent league, waiting for a big shot.
Yes,
I am too.
We definitely are. So the next debate topic is: do intentional walks even matter? And Jack, I'm caught in between this because being a former pitcher, I never wanted to do this, and I never did. I even had one circumstance when a manager came out to the mound one time and said he wanted to walk a big kid named Kirk Oppenheimer. I still remember the guy. He was a big, huge guy, had a lot of power. We played him one game before. I was playing at my other position, which was third base, and he hit 2 home runs against us, and they won the game. And but when I was at third base, I noticed that he hit his home runs to right center, so he didn't have the fastest bat, and he had a lot of power, but not a fast bat. When the manager came out, he said, we should intentionally walk this, and I said, I think I can get this guy out or pop him up, and he went with what I said, believe it or not, and I did. I came in hard and inside and struck him out because I thought his bat was slow, and it kind of worked out. But I do think intentional walks at the major league level is a strategy that they use, especially when you have a hot hitter. Say, like, for instance, say DJ LeMahieu comes up. There's a guy on second and third with one out. And you need to win this game. I think that strategy to walk him would be a good one. Or if you had a power guy like Barry Bonds and you were tied in the ninth inning and he's up and he can untie it with one swing, especially with nobody on base, I think putting him on first would be a good call because you don't want him to win the game at that point. I think maybe they should change one of the rules that you just tell the umpire when there's nobody on base, I'm going to walk this guy, and let's not hold up the game because you're going to pitch 4 pitches as opposed to when somebody's on base and there could be a wild pitch or you could steal a base. So I think it's an important part of the game. And why not do it? And I think in a lot of cases, Jack, it does matter where, you do have a hot hitter, a good high average hitter that's coming up with people in scoring position and you have a base open, or like I said, a guy with power like Barry Bonds who could win the game in the bottom of the ninth with one swing. I think it does matter. So I think that it does overall matter whether the intentional walk is part of your strategy.
I hate it. When I was young, I learned this from Little League, and didn't make sense to me then. It doesn't make sense to me now. They'd used the Dodgers, the Los Angeles Dodgers, as an example with Murray Wills, their speedster shortstop. The way the Dodgers won games, we were told Murray Wills would walk. Then he'd get bunted to second. Then he would steal third. Then they'd hit a fly ball to the outfield, a sacrifice fly. He'd score. He'd get 1 run. And then Sandy Koufax would shut the other team out, and that would be it. It doesn't work that way. I like Earl Weaver's long ball thing. Now, as far as the intentional walk thing goes, It's rare that I'm going to back an intentional walk. Let's say you have the pitcher up next. There are 2 outs. I might back an intentional walk. Then, depending on whether it's a good hitting pitcher, it's just plain out bad. I've seen it backfire more than succeed, the intentional walk. I've seen situations in games over and over. It's a tie game in extra innings. The home team gets a guy on third base. There are no outs. And I've seen managers intentionally walk the next 2 guys to load up the bases so they could set up a force at home and then a double play. What always happens, just about always, the next guy is going to be walked. You're putting your pitcher under so much more pressure after an intentional walk. He's got to throw strikes. And he's got to throw effective strikes right after he intentionally walks a batter. Okay? He's gotten into the habit of not throwing a strike because he's thrown 4 balls in a row. So the first pitch after that's a ball. Now what he's thinking, I can't afford to walk this guy because I'm going to walk in the winning run or whatever. So he's going to come right over the plate, and you know what the results are going to be. It just has potential, like, for more damage. It's a bad percentage play, and it's giving into the bat as well. You mentioned the Barry Bonds thing. They did that with Barry Bonds. Amazingly, the game would be tied up, and they would intentionally walk him and put him on first base. My feeling is this. If you have a situation like that, just pitch him extra carefully. Pitch him out of the strike zone. You have nothing to lose by walking him if you were going to walk him anyway. Make him go after bad pitches, because once you can make him go after bad pitches, even if he's going to swing, he's going to lose effectiveness. He's not going to be the same Barry Bonds. So to me, only in rare instances do I back it up. The heck with the intentional walk. I don't like it. Just pitch the ball out of the strike zone. Maybe you get the batter, go after a bad pitch because you would have nothing to lose. I don't like the intentional walk, all in all.
Well, as I said, Jack, I don't like it either, but I think you're wrong. The reason why they have the intentional walk is so being careful to a batter means what? Meaning get close as you can and make them go after bad pitches, and you make that one mistake, and Barry Bonds puts it in the bay. So to me, the intentional walk, and as I said with DJ LeMahieu, with guys on second and third and nobody out or 1 out, why would you pitch to the man if you don't have to, if he's hot? That's crazy.
You put DJ LeMahieu on base. Now the pitcher's under pressure. If he walks the next batter,
he's under pressure.
You know he's got to come over.
He's under pressure pitching to DJ LeMahieu with 2 guys on first and second, with second and third and no outs too. He's under pressure.
Listen, it depends who's up next. Let's say they've made double switches and it's extra innings and you have Debbie Garcia pitch up next. Of course I would walk DJ LeMahieu. It depends who's up next with the percentage play. Yeah.
So I guess we kind of agree that in some circumstances it does matter.
Not many. For the most part, I don't like it. Once in a while, I can understand it.
Here, you were talking about pitching around a guy. I just got this great story from Mark Armour of the Society of Baseball Research. I was actually talking to him about Ted Williams, and I asked him what his favorite Ted Williams story was. And Jack, you were talking about how you pitch around somebody, and this is what he shared with me. Some rookie Yankee left-hander was going over the Red Sox lineup with Yogi Berra, and when he got to Williams, he said, "For strong left-handed hitters, I like to start with a fastball up and in, and then throw a slider low and away and get him to chase." And then Yogi responds, "Well, good. Now the count is 2-0. Now what are you going to do?"
Right. So I mean, again, I do not like the intentional walk. I like to see the best go against the best. But in certain cases, you don't have the best against the best. You don't have an ace pitching to Barry Bonds.
Let me tell you a funny story, and Doc might remember this game. You might remember it. The Yankees are playing the Mets. They're second and third. Derek Jeter's up, and the Mets, Mariano Rivera's on deck. And the first pitch, they're pitching to Derek Jeter. Ball 1, Derek Jeter steps out of the box, and he's like smiling and looking on in amazement. thinking they're not walking me to get to Mariano. But the Mets weren't thinking at the time. They just had a mental lapse. Then they intentionally walked Derek Jeter on the next 3 pitches. They load the bases up. Now Mariano's at bat, and the Yankee dugout loves it. They're having fun with this. You know, Mariano's at bat, bases loaded. Francisco Rodriguez is on the mound. He walks Mariano, as it turns out. He didn't mean to walk him, but that shows the way the intentional walk could backfire, even when it's justified.
Definitely, Jack. I definitely agree with that. So, again, I think we kind of both agree to a point that certain circumstances, it's good strategy. Me personally, Jack, I love to see, a great pitcher go against a great hitter with men on second and third and nobody out. I love that. That's to me, that's excitement instead of intentionally walking the guy. So if it is personal, I definitely agree with you. If I'm a manager, I might think twice about it. So
could I ask you guys this a question? Like in the case of Barry Bonds, when he had that historic year, the 73 homers, I'm not talking about the circumstances behind that, but he had an amazing year, like unlike any other. They intentionally walked him a ridiculous amount of times, as I remember. Should the commissioner's office in certain cases invoke a rule that they have to pitch to him, especially when he was going for the record? I remember the Astro manager, Larry Durka. They wouldn't give him anything to hit. They were basically intentionally walking him all the time. You don't think so? To stop a guy from getting a record?
No.
I think there were arguments about that same thing happening to Hank Greenberg in the late 30s, where they didn't want him to break Babe Ruth's record. But no, I think you just have to trust that teams are going to do the right thing, and that the pressure among the other teams would be, you can't just keep walking guys. You have, but I don't think the commissioner should jump in and say you can't do this or you can't do that, because
okay,
how do you police that?
What about this? When Roger Maris was tied with Babe Ruth the last game of the season, what happens? And they're playing the Red Sox, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if they're deciding they're just going to intentionally walk Roger Maris every time he steps to the plate because they don't want him to break the record?
And I think that you have an argument there, but it didn't happen, right? And I don't think a team's ever done that, because I don't think a team would do that. That'd be too blatant to prevent.
Not only that, I think the bottom line, I hope anyway, if you're any kind of baseball team or baseball manager, you're out to win every game. The record be the record, but you're out there to win the game. And when you should intentionally walk them, then maybe you should. But if you're just doing that to not let a person break a record, or even in a perfect game, right? A guy tries to bunt his way on. I mean, are you going to make a rule against that too? I mean,
it depends. No, you can't. But it depends on certain situations. If a guy has a perfect game, but the team batting is down 1-0 in the last inning, the guy feels he can get a bunt to get on first base, and the game is seriously on the line. I don't condemn the bunting. That's a debate for another time, the baseball mentality, because people would be outraged over the bunt. We should debate on that another time, the ethics.
That's part of the game. When you start changing the game is when I hate, and I stop watching things. So in our next debate, folks, we turn to the NBA, and there's been a lot of talk, and there's been talk about this in the past, on whether they should change the logo. And Jack goes first on that this debate. So Jack, should they change or make an amendment or anything to the NBA?
Well, actually, Kyrie Irving invoked this debate. I'm not the biggest fan of Kyrie Irving with all the issues he has, but this was a good, healthy thing with the debate he did. I don't agree with the Kobe Bryant thing, and the NBA is not going to do it because Kobe Bryant did have an issue in Colorado that they don't want groups protesting a controversy. But there's a good point. Jerry West is the one on the logo right now. And that's the known logo of the NBA. But no one says if you put someone on the logo, they've got to be on the logo for life. I mean, records are broken in sports all the time. Changes are made. And I'm not necessarily against Jerry West being taken off the logo, but there are alternatives. Why not put several guys on the NBA logo, small, what do you call it, Stitches or whatever, I'm pronouncing it wrong, and just change the outlook of the logo. You could keep them on. Also, this is a sensitive point, and I'm making it, and I'm making it alone. When Jerry West played, okay, this who was the better player, him or the big O Oscar Robertson? Oscar Robertson was the better player, the greater player than Jerry West. Jerry West was a superstar, but if you ask any objective observer, the big O was the greater player, yet the big O isn't on the logo, wasn't put on the logo at the time. Make it at what you want. I have a couple of propositions. One I just made, put a few guys on the logo. You can leave West on the logo, so on. And you could then add in Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, guys who made a great social impact, Bird and Magic Johnson, who really pushed the NBA to another level. You could put those two on the logo. Or how about putting a great NBA legend, a different one on the logo every year? Okay, you keep the same background in the logo, but just fit in the player's shadow or however you want to do it. They didn't sign a contract for life to keep Jerry West on the logo. As great as he's represented the NBA as both a player and in the front office, it's not a lifetime contract that they agreed to.
So Jack, here we go again, changing things that don't need to be changed. We have a logo that has been around forever. It looks like a basketball player. To tell you the truth, I didn't know who that basketball player was until somebody actually told me it was Jerry West. There is no name of that basketball player on there. It's a basketball figure that happened to resemble Jerry West. I didn't even know that until I got later on in years. So here we go. We got Jerry. We're going to do what you say. Say we're going to put some other or make the logo bigger. How big is this logo going to be, Jack? It's got to be retroactive. You mentioned Bill Russell. You didn't mention Will Chamberlain, who still has scoring records. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, definitely. Oscar, yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Put the big O on there. I mean, where do we stop? Where do we stop at how many people we put on there? Are we going to put? We should put Michael Jordan on there, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. And like you said, Larry Bird should be on there. Magic Johnson should be on there, right? I mean, shouldn't Dr. J be on there too? I mean, he was an unbelievable basketball player. And of course, now we're gonna have to put LeBron James on there, maybe eventually Durant. And as we go on the years, this logo is going to get huge. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon it won't even fit on the screen anymore. So, I mean, I understand that maybe there is an argument for having another guy in a logo, but why change something that isn't hurting anybody? We have a place for all these great players, Jack. It's called the Basketball Hall of Fame. That's where all these great players go so they can be recognized, so we can look at their records, look at the history of what they've done, how they've contributed to the NBA. A logo is a logo, Jack. I mean, listen, why don't we just do this too? While we're at it, we'll change the Stanley Cup's name to the Gretzky Cup, or maybe to the Messier Cup one year, and then we'll make it, the Gordie Howe Cup the next year. We'll take the Vince Lombardi Trophy, we'll make it the Belichick Trophy, we'll make it the Don Shula Trophy. We'll change it. This is nonsense, Jack. This is something to create news. This is something to get Kyrie Irving in the news and to prove a point that means nothing. The logo's the logo. Leave it alone. It hasn't hurt anybody. It doesn't make anybody else less better than Jerry West. All it is a logo of a basketball player that resembles Jerry West. Again, I don't think a lot of people know who this guy was until they're told who this guy is. It's a picture of a basketball player. So when you consider stuff that has nothing to do with the history of the basketball game, I mean, Meadowlark Lemon could go on there too. I mean, he was famous. He had the Harlem Globetrotters, probably the most famous basketball team in the history of sports. It's ridiculous, Jack. Leave the logo alone. Leave the Vince Lombardi Trophy alone. Leave the Stanley Cup alone. Let it sit where it is. They get plenty of notoriety, these players that are great. It doesn't have to mean you have to change a logo, Jack.
All right, so I didn't have an opinion on this. I have to be honest, not a big basketball guy. And so I've heard of the name Jerry West. I never saw Jerry West play, but when I saw that this was going to be a topic, I said, oh, let me research this. And there's a site called Larry Brown Sports. And it says the current NBA logo was designed in 1969, features a silhouette of the Los Angeles Lakers legend and Hall of Famer Jerry West. But when asked about this several years ago, the former NBA commissioner David Stern said, I didn't know that it was Jerry West. And he said, there's no record of it here. But here's the thing. Everyone knows that the logo depicts West, according to this site, but there is no licensing agreement between West and the NBA. Mm-hmm. And so if they used his image, they're using his image, but he doesn't get any residuals from that. And if they were going to start changing the image every year and paying different players, that would be a whole marketing thing too. They'd have to pay the player for their likeness. I never looked at that logo and even thought it's anybody, just like with the Major League Baseball logo. I don't know that that's anybody. I don't think it's anybody. It's just a random picture of a batter. So I don't think most people would know that that's Jerry West if the topic never came up. They would have just said it's a basketball player because it's a basketball logo. And it seems to work. I don't see any reason to change it.
What do you think? What do you think of this, guys? If it becomes too big a controversy, just an idea. The fans would vote on this. Once a year, you would have a different player on the logo, and if the fans would vote on it, it would be a fun vote. Who's the logo next year? They would have a ballot with the legends, and every year it would change to another legend, and the fans would make the decisions, and no one could get on.
And it would be a silhouette, like a silhouette, like you're saying.
No, one player, just one player.
Right, but it would look like the one now where you can't really tell who it is. It's just his outline.
Well, yeah, look like the one now, but on a different player. The fans would vote. So this way, if there's any controversy in any groups, let's say, object because of a player's background, keep in mind it would be the fans, the masses that decided. So
yeah, you know what? That's kind of fun. I have no objection to that.
It could be a lot of fun. Bill Russell one year, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I'll tell you what, they'd sell a lot of things. They'd have to pay the marketing for the player, but they would sell a lot of things. This is the year that it's Bill Russell. This is the year it's Michael Jordan. People would pay big money for those collectibles.
The only problem with that, guys, is that the player would have to be popular enough to get on there. Okay, right? Who's going to vote for Will Chamberlain or Bill Russell when you got Michael Jordan and LeBron James? So you're going to see LeBron James on that logo every year, or a Kobe Bryant. You're not going to
No, they can only be on 1 year.
Well,
one year, that's all. And then that's it, and then it's the next guy up.
That would kind of work out like the way the Major League All-Stars work out right now, or the NBA All-Stars. I mean, to me, it's a big deal about nothing. I mean, how about the great coaches of all time? Do we put Red Auerbach on there? Do we put, do we put, I mean, to me,
no players.
Listen, Jack, all I'm saying is it's ridiculous. It is what it is. Just let it stay. It doesn't hurt nobody. It doesn't hurt anybody, except maybe Kyrie Irving's feelings for some reason because he wants to talk about something.
But Mac, it would be different signature moves. For example, Dr. J 1 year dunking the ball, and they would compare logos, fans, as the years went by, which logo they liked the most. They would have their signature moves, like Michael Jordan in the air, Bill Russell grabbing a rebound, Wilt Chamberlain dunking the ball. It could be a lot of fun.
Do you really believe that you would go that petty over something that's been standing for the last how many years, Jack, that we're going to change that because we want to have a fun thing to do? Do you really believe that's good for the sport?
Well, I'm saying if the logo thing is turning into a controversy here and they feel the NBA need to make a change finally, I'm talking about the best changes. Personally, I don't care about the NBA logo, and I don't think most people care.
Right, exactly.
And like Doc says, most people aren't even aware that it's Jerry West or whatever. It's just a guy dribbling the ball.
I agree, Jack. So why?
By the way, LeBron James loves Jerry West. He read his book over and over and over. That motivated him, he said, to win a championship with the Cavaliers because what Jerry West had to go through to win his first NBA title, the journey he was on, it fascinated LeBron James.
And again, so now we do that, and then we end up changing the Vince Lombardi Trophy to, you know, the Don Shula Trophy. That would be fun too. Let's
listen. I know this. Whenever someone passes away, people want an award named after them. I know. Listen, one of my dear friends was Harold Letterman, who was the unofficial judge for HBO. We're very, very close personal friends. And when he passed away, I would get calls wanting, you know, awards. The Boxing Writers Association of America should change, you know, give him an award, take someone else's name off. And I said, as much as I loved Harold, as close as I was with him, what did he contribute with the organization? This, that. We have guys on who worked years relentlessly for the organization. You know, listen, it's a touchy subject. It's an emotional subject. You want to honor a guy in the right way, but it's not musical chairs until you put someone else, you name an award after them, and then what are you going to do? The next guy, you know, with something happens, you're going to want to put him in the other place and keep it going. But with the logo, I mean, maybe it could be turned into a way where a lot of fun can be done with it. You know,
I will say this: I think Jack's idea has merit and marketability. I think I could see posters and all the different NBA logos over the year. You have the sky hook and all different things.
And Dr. J dunk in the sky. Yeah, the sky hook. Wouldn't that be a pretty NBA logo? Green going over the top.
Again, we're making a big deal out of something that shouldn't be a big deal, and now we're going to have an event attached to it, and now you're going to pay players more money, and come on, man.
Listen, Mac, you never know. If you could get a line of signature hats for the Mac and Jack show, you'd be changing your hat all the time.
No, this is my hat, Jack. I had a hat when I came in, and I'll have a hat when I go out, as my grandfather used to say.
If you do that, do you have like the Saturday hat with my logo on it? Like
that's an idea, Doc. You want some sponsorship? We're happy.
Doc, we might get some Met fans on there who might want to argue and debate you and make a bet that if you lose, you got to wear a Met cap for a full show.
I can do that.
There you go. So we'll say any Met fans.
What about a Red Sox cap?
I can do that.
Well, the way they're playing now, it's easier to do.
The thing I would bet would be that Doc would not only wear the Mets hat but sing the Mets theme song. That would be great. So anyway, folks, we got our last break. We'll be back on the other side with an interesting debate. Whose championship team was better? And we're taking the star players, Bill Russell's championship team or Larry Bird's championship team. Of course, they're not their team, but you know what we mean. That time, that era, who was better? So we'll be right back after these breaks, folks. Stay with us.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again.
Alex is just
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Infoline. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
If you talk, they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
How come?
Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's gonna be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he gonna know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it though, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Try.
This is a special broadcast of the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Yes, sir, folks. Tomorrow's the big show or special, the 50th anniversary of the fight of the century, a day early, but we'll cover with some great guests, Jack, some great information, videos on a fight that set the standard for today's fights. Nothing like it. This, of course, will be our special tomorrow as Ali faces off against Frazier in the fight of the century. Two undefeated world champions. One, Ali got his suspension revoked so he could fight against Frazier, both undefeated. And what a hype and what a fight, Jack.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 50 years ago, Monday will be the 50th anniversary. Greatest event, most anticipated event in the history of mankind. And that includes man walking on the moon. Man walking on the moon, we knew basically what was going to happen. We had that great curiosity factor. But Ali Frazier, when you had to live through it to understand it, there's never been anything like it. You could take all your World Series Super Bowls and roll them up into one. It doesn't even come close to, the first Ali Frazier fight, the level of anticipation.
This was promoted Hollywood style, one of the first promotions that were done this way in the history of boxing. And, all we were looking for was that this would be the type of fight that will live up to the hype. And what a fight it was, Jack. Doc, I don't know if you are a boxing fan or not, but I'll tell you right now, we'll have video of this fight, interviews. We're going to have some of the most known boxing experts and analysts around that know the history of boxing, and they were there at this event. We even have a fighter on the undercard coming in who was there that night fighting before the Frazier fight took place. So it's going to be dynamite. I hope everyone out there will join us as we'll be going live with this Northeast Streaming Sports. and we'll be going live to a lot of different platforms. So tomorrow, folks, 8 to 10 a.m., join us for one of the best specials you're going to see on a broadcast. And I'm not bragging either. That's the truth. So we're back to the debate, Jack. We have which championship team was greater, the Russell Celtics or the Bird Celtics? I go first on this one. And let me not break it down as individual players, because arguably the 86 Celtics, I think I'm saying it right. I don't know if it was 86 or not. Now I got a memory freeze. But with that front court of McHale, Parrish, and Bird was one of the greatest front courts in the history of basketball. There's no doubt about that. Larry Bird was an unbelievable assist man, an unbelievable scorer. You had Parrish that was there for the dunks and rebounds. McHale with his moves underneath. I mean, it was an incredible team. There's no doubt about it. So I want to look at it overall, Jack, and you have 9 championships, Jack. You had a team that was Showtime before the Lakers. They ran that court. They would run you out of the auditorium, out of the stadium, out of the court, whatever you want to call where they played, out of the Celtic arena. You didn't have a chance. These guys ran constantly, led by Bill Russell, arguably the greatest rebounder of all time. And off that defense, they would take the ball off his block shots or off his rebounds, and they would come right back at you at full speed. So as far as an overall team goes, there was no team like it in that era, and that's the only thing I can compare it to, that era versus the Bird era. The Bird era had a lot of great teams. I mean, you can't deny the Sixers, the Lakers, the Chicago Bulls. I mean, they had teams and competitive in that era that were unbelievable and unbelievable teams at their own. But let me take a look at the Celtic team back then. All right, as I said, a well-oiled machine, and you had a defense that was smothering. You had an offense of Havlicek, Jones, Snatch, Sanders, Frank Ramsey, Dom Nelson, and again, they would run the floor the whole game. And this is what they did to other teams. You couldn't stay with them. They were so aggressive and so fast, moving that ball back up the court. So when it boils down to me, Jack, is very simply that you have 9 championships versus I think it is 2, 3 at the most, if I'm correct, in an era where basketball was truly a physical team sport. As of today, it's more of an individual sport.
Okay, I'm going to make my point. You're mentioning the Celtic championships, and you're saying they were better because of all their championships. You're pointing to the evidence, I believe.
Yes.
Straight out. Let me just detour very slightly a few seconds. Doc, name me 3 of the greatest pitchers in baseball history. They could be anyone. Give me 3 of them.
All right. Walter Johnson, Lefty Grove, Sandy Koufax.
Okay, listen, Cy Young was better than all of them. Cy Young won 511 games, so I don't know how you could say that. That's the argument you're making, Mac. I can make an argument, well, Cy Young, look at all. No one comes even close. And that's the argument you're making with the Celtics. Celtics were more accomplished only because of winning all those championships during their era, and they were great. And they beat some good Laker teams there. The Laker teams are very good who they beat. I got to give them their due. They beat Laker teams with Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Gail Goodrich. I mean, they beat close series. They beat the Philadelphia 76er teams that had Will Chamberlain, Hal Greer, Billy Cunningham. Those Boston Celtic Russell teams were great. They always found a way to win. But they were playing in an era where there were like 10 teams or so in their era compared to the later amount that approached 30. They didn't quite beat the Showtime Lakers of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, who were a little better than those other Laker teams that the Celtics did beat. And Larry Bird's Celtics had to go up against teams that were better, let's face it. And the way basketball was set up, you know, the amount of rounds you had to play to get to the finals and so on. They had it a little easier, much as in baseball, those great Yankee teams who won, 5 World Series in a row, let's say 1949 through 1953. They didn't have playoff rounds. They just won the American League pennant. We used to call it a pennant. We don't use that term anymore, pennant. That used to be a magical term, remember? But if those Yankee teams had to go through playoff rounds, maybe they win 5 championships in a row. Maybe they don't. We'll never know. The nature has changed. I'll say this. You mentioned the 86 Celtic team with Larry Bird, in the front court, so on, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. They had Bill Walton coming off the bench. And Bill Walton was still very good. Imagine that as a sixth man, the great Bill Walton coming off the bench. They were 40-1 at home. Imagine that record, 40 wins, 1 loss at home. They were nearly invincible at home. I mean, I'll agree, they were more accomplished, Russell's Celtics teams. They were great. More accomplished at peak value. And I'm only talking about peak value. I'll go with Bird's Celtics at peak value. But if I had to say who was greater based on accomplishment, I'd say Russell's Celtics, much as we would say Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time based on accomplishments. But if you put someone else against him as a quarterback at absolute peak value, you could then make an argument either way. So, it's not a debate I want to get into too hard because, listen, how can you argue against Russell's Celtics? They always found a way to win, and that's what you ask in sports. But I love Bird's Celtic teams,
And I'll agree with most of what you said, Jack. The only thing is I would have loved to see that Celtic team, that Russell Celtic team, go against those 80 teams. Because I think they would be extremely competitive and may win some of those playoff rounds and those championships because of how they were Showtime before the Lakers were the Showtime, Jack. I mean, they were they run up and down the court. I don't know if teams in the 80s or today could keep up with these guys. These guys were awesome. And they did have great shooters too. So, I mean, I would have loved to actually see both teams in their prime going at it. It would have been awesome.
You said it best, Mac. I don't know whether you realize what you said, and that you made a great point. You said if those Russell teams had played late in the 80s, 90s, whatever, they would have won some championships. And I'm not disagreeing. Yeah. They would have won some championships, but the 11 championships that Russell won in 13 years, it wouldn't have been 11 in the 13 years, put it that way. Maybe 4, maybe 5. Agreed. They would have won some championships, those Celtic teams, but the eras were different. What happens if Bird's Celtics had flip-flopped them with Russell's, the eras? Maybe they wouldn't have won 11 out of 13. Maybe they wouldn't have been as good as Russell's, but they certainly would have won more than 3 NBA titles, which they ultimately, wound up winning.
Yeah. So what do you think, Doc? Any opinion on either way?
No, when you get to basketball, you're way out of my wheelhouse. So I will declare that you both are correct.
Well, that's why we love having you on.
Yeah.
So,
listen, I'll settle. That's a fair thing. I think we both are correct on this. One.
That was it's a hard one to, especially being in different areas. It's very hard to compare players because of the advantages they had back then and the advantages they have now. So, that's like arguing, could LeBron have been a superstar back in the 80s? A lot of people think that maybe not because of the physicality of the game. But
with a big body like his, give me a break. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, superstar.
LeBron would have been a great tight end in football. He could take the physicality. He drives to the basket. He intimidates players today when he drives to the basket. You can't stop him. He's a physical player.
I would have loved to see a matchup against Shaq or Oakley, and we'd see how great he would have.
Shaq was a powerhouse. Oh, yeah, they would have hit him on the way to the basket. He would have given back as well. It would have,
Yeah. He wouldn't be flip-flopping back then, Jack, falling down when somebody didn't even touch him. So I guarantee you that. So our last debate, Jack, is the 2-minute drill drive. You know, what quarterback in the history of football, here we go, comparing eras again, what quarterback would you pick if you had 2 minutes left, the game's on the line, who you taking?
Mac, I could give you one of 10, 12 quarterbacks, and how do you argue any of them? So I can't make a firm argument, say my guy is better than the rest. When we talk about the 2-minute drive, it's not exactly 2 minutes. What we really mean, the team has one drive left at the end of the game where they absolutely have to take the ball the length of the field and score. That's what we mean, because it's never 2 minutes exactly. Listen, I could pull off a shocker, and I could say Eli Manning if I wanted to. The 2 Super Bowls the Giants won, he led them on those drives at the end of the game to win it. They had to score, otherwise they weren't going to win, and he led them to 2 touchdowns. So if I said Eli Manning, you can't argue. He had a tendency to do it. I mean, I always think of the greatest drive in NFL history, John Elway, the 98-yard drive against Cleveland to tie the game, and then the Broncos won in overtime to go to the Super Bowl. John Elway has 35 fourth-quarter comebacks. The only quarterback in history who has more fourth-quarter comebacks is Dan Marino, who has only one more. I mean, I'm going to go with John Elway. I'm aware of the other drives. I'm aware of Joe Montana taking the Niners on a drive, you know, to win the Super Bowl against the Bengals, taking, you know, them on a drive to beat the Dallas Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl. You know, the great Johnny U. You know, there's Tom Brady, of course. You know, Peyton wasn't bad. Aaron Rodgers wasn't bad. Give me Patrick Mahomes. Am I going to cry about it? Absolutely not. There's so many of them, Mac. But that 98-yard drive by John Elway to take the ball from your own 2-yard line. And I've seen Elway over and over again. You give him an opening at the end of the game. You turn the ball over to him, and he's going to get it done at one way or the other. So that's my choice, John Elway. But I'm not arguing with you if you give me 10 other guys, you know, who are big names.
Yeah, I mean, I think Elway is course that you're talking about that drive against the Browns. But, you know, in the Super Bowl, he came up short a few times when it was all just him. So
they were slaughtered in those games. That right, they lost. It didn't matter.
So I mean, that's the only reason why I wouldn't take a.
It's not greatest quarterback, Mac. It's on the drive.
But at the biggest, I'm saying at the biggest point of the game, and again, I'm not disagreeing with Elway's Elway pick, especially the drive against the Browns. You know, we forget the comeback kid a lot. We forget about Roger Staubach and what he did with the Cowboys a lot. And, of course, Bradshaw, what he did in the Super Bowl against the Cowboys. But I'm going to go with the original, Jack. I'm going to go with the one who really began that last 2-minute drive, as they call it, the 2-minute last drive of the game. And we've talked about this on the show before. The greatest game in the NFL was the Giants against the Baltimore Colts. And, of course, it went to overtime, the first really game that captured the imagination of the fans out there. And Johnny Unitas in that game did something that Sam Huff said we knew he was going to do it. We just couldn't stop him. Johnny Unitas was a quarterback that could play today. He's a lot like Joe Montana. He had great accuracy. He had a decent arm, but he was a heck of a leader, Jack. And in that game, he kept throwing down the field, and the Giants knew he was going to throw, and they couldn't stop him setting up that last run in an overtime for the Colts to win that championship. But that at that time was equal to what the Super Bowl would be today. So if I was to pick, I would have to go with the original guy, Jack. I would have to go with the guy who really started this 2-minute drive, as they call it, having the ball in your hands in the last drive and bringing them down. And when it counted the most in the biggest game, they say, in NFL history, I have to go with Johnny Unitas.
Well, Doc, anything you want to add to that?
Again, not as much of a football historian as you guys, but if I had to pick one, I would pick Aaron Rodgers, just because I think those fourth quarter Hail Mary passes and all that is just super exciting. And so for the excitement factor, that's who I would pick.
And that's,
yeah, you mentioned that game, Doc, in 1950. That was in 1958, the championship game, the Giants and the Colts, which
In Yankee
ushered
Stadium.
in football. Yeah, in Yankee Stadium. Yeah. Imagine a game NFL played at Yankee Stadium now. I mean, would be. But Johnny Unitas actually, what had happened, Frank Gifford always complained about this. He felt they had gotten a first down. He'd gotten a first down on, third down, and the officials marked the ball short of where he said it actually was. So the Giants wound up punting, and Unitas they were down 3, the Colts. Unitas took the team down nearly the length of the field for the tying field goal at the end of the game, and then they won it at overtime. I mean, a lot of great moments, a lot of great plays, but all these great quarterbacks we both talked about, they'll find a way to beat you if you give them an opening. That's how great they are. Put the ball in their hands at the end of the game. That's why the Packer coach, Michael LaFleur, got in trouble this year when they were down 8 points. Rather than let Aaron Rodgers go for it on fourth down, he kicked the field goal thinking, well, if his defense stops Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers gets the ball back. But this is Tom Brady. You can't count on stopping him. When you have a chance to go for it, don't put the ball back in a great quarterback's hands.
well, you mentioned Tom Brady, and what was interesting about them Super Bowls that they played against the Giants, Tom Brady did have the ball in his hands in the last drive and was unable to do it in those 2 games.
No, Mac, come on. You're exaggerating. You remind me of when I read the narrative.
First of all, tell me I'm exaggerating. The Patriots had the ball at the end of the game, and one time was it Walker that dropped the ball, and the other time he threw it to Gronk, who was covered. He did have the ball last. Now, Eli Manning did drive them down on his last possession and score that touchdown.
One of the Super Bowls, you're partly right. The one that the Patriots had the unbeaten season going and lost, Tom Brady took the Patriots down the length of the field for the go-ahead touchdown, and there was a little over 2 minutes left. He took them down the field for the go-ahead touchdown. Then, of course, the Giants counted back the helmet catch. They got the touchdown. And by the time Tom Brady got the ball in his hands again, there was maybe, 34 seconds left. And even then, he nearly pulled off a miracle on the long pass to Randy Moss, where Corey Webster barely got his hand in to block the pass. Even Tom Coughlin said he saw the ball going right into Randy Moss's hands. He put him in position. The second Super Bowl they lost to the Giants, okay? He should have had he kept the drive going, Eli Manning wouldn't have gotten the ball back to be able to then counter. But even after Eli Manning had the go-ahead touchdown, remember the Hail Mary in the end zone that was deflected and fell right before Gronk? Yeah. So he even was putting him in position there in a way.
Yeah.
So I don't say he didn't get it. I mean, he didn't get it done in the second Super Bowl against the Giants because he didn't quite keep the chains moving the whole time. I think he got a couple of first downs and then the drive kind of stalled. So you could maybe mention that one, but not the first Super Bowl.
I'm not taking nothing away from Tom Brady because he's had a lot of great drives at the end, Jack. I'm not doing that. I'm just recalling a couple times where he didn't get it done. That's all. That's all I'm doing. So,
one time he didn't quite get it done as good as he should have, I believe, but not a couple.
So again, I go with the original, Jack. I'll take Johnny Unitas any day on the last drive in his prime, any day of the week. So, Doc, let's talk a little bit about your blog out there. Let the people know about what's going on with Start Spreading the News, because I think it's important that Yankee fans and even baseball fans, as I said, you have a lot of updates on Major League Baseball over there too.
Oh, well, thank you. So Start Spreading the News. It's at startspreadingthenews.blog. It's primarily a Yankee site, but it's a baseball site. And we put up new articles 4 times every single day. There are original articles at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 4 p.m. During the week, we have a baseball card trivia every day at noon. We put up a daily tweet every day at 3. We have certain features every Tuesday at 10 a.m. We have a discussion with our writers. Every Thursday at 10 a.m., we have an interview with someone affiliated with the game. Lots of writers and people like that. all great interviews. These are well worth reading and seeing. On Sunday nights, we put up a special video of a documentary. Wednesday nights, we put up the Wednesday Night Classics, which is an old Yankee game. On Fridays, we have our weekly mailbag. On Saturday, we put up all the links about Yankee news around the internet. And we've now gotten to over 2 million page views on the site. People seem to really love the site, and I think that's because we really work hard to provide quality content that's fan friendly. In the beginning of the show, we were talking about Skip Bayless and different people in the media who say stuff just to get people aggravated and to drive viewership. We don't do anything like that. We speak from the heart. We speak honestly. We speak respectfully. But we all have a passion for baseball and the Yankees, and I think we do a great job reporting on it.
I do too. I think the site is tremendous, Doc. We have a link on our website right to your blog, so people can't find you. And it's a Twitter account, if I'm correct, right, Doc?
It's a regular blog, but our each post gets posted on Twitter so that people can see what the latest post is. But it's a regular blog. Yep. Yeah,
excellent. So people check out. Start spreading the news. And I said, if you're a baseball fan and if you're a Yankee fan, I mean, it's one of the best sites I've seen, and I'm around the social media a lot. And Doc, give us a rundown on your new book, Start Spreading the Ashes, award-winning book. I mean, I know it's doing well as sales go, and I know you got one more book that you're almost done with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Scattering the Ashes is my novel that came out 1.5 years ago. And it's won a number of awards. People have really, really, really appreciated it and loved it. It's a great story. I encourage people to get it. I have a Yankee book coming out in October that's called The Least Among Them, which details a lot of unknown Yankee history, but focusing on 29 players whose entire career was of just one game as a Yankee. And that was their whole career. They made it to the major leagues. They played one game as a Yankee, and it tells the story of each of those players. But then I extrapolate their story into a bigger story. And I've shared the book with numerous big-time baseball writers and big-time and little-time baseball writers, all sorts of baseball writers. And there's a post up on the blog right now where it recounts a lot of the positive feedback that the book's getting in early previews, and people are loving it. And I think it's going to be a big hit, so I'm really excited about it.
And a very interesting topic, and to me, I'm definitely going to check it out. I got Scattering the Ashes. I'm definitely going to check out that book too. Any thoughts on any other future books going through?
Yeah, I have a book of essays. I don't know if I have it right here. I do. It's called Impossible is an Illusion. These are all motivational essays. And then I have a follow-up called Possibility is Everything. That should be coming out probably in April. We're just finishing up the edits on that one. So, and then I have another novel, but I have to wait a little while. I have to get these other projects done before I could really delve into that.
I hear you, Doc. I mean, it's constantly, it's a lot. People don't realize. People think you just sit down and write a book. It definitely ain't that easy.
It's years and years of work, no doubt.
Yankee history, Doc. I mean, we have a big 50th anniversary. Ali Frazier, Joe DiMaggio was a big boxing fan. You'd see him at ringside at a lot of the fights. I mean, he was a regular there, so on. I don't know whether he was at the 50th, at the Ali Frazier one, I'm not aware of that. Also, Whitey Ford's, who was related to him through marriage. I knew a former fighter, Bobby Bartels, and he told me Whitey Ford and Mickey Mantle used to go to, his fights, a number of times to see. So there's a link. The Yankees were fight fans outside of the
fights at Yankee Stadium too, right?
Yeah. Big fights. Major fights at Yankee Stadium. So you think of Yankee Stadium for baseball, but it was big in boxing. Ali Frazier one was on March 8th, 1971, so they couldn't hold it outdoors at Yankee Stadium. It was in Madison Square Garden. And I'm looking forward, Mac, to our big show tomorrow night with all the guests who are there.
And it's funny. It's funny, guys, how a lot of these players and writers kind of, they intertwine, because boxing is not a team loyalty thing, right? You like a fighter, and it stretches across all the spectrums of sports, right? You can be a Yankee fan and like Ali and be a Red Sox fan and like Ali. It doesn't mean that, you don't like it because of that. So, of course, I'm a big Frazier fan. And for that, I don't dislike Muhammad Ali. But as far as the rivalry goes, I'll take Frazier any day. But that's just me. So anyways, folks, tomorrow join us for our big boxing special where we'll be covering it from beginning to the end to the rivalry. Folks, it's going to be a great show. Join us, and we'll be going live to a lot of platforms, as I say. Doc, thank you for joining us again. It was a pleasure having you here.
No, pleasure's all mine.
Sports show.
Thanks, Jack.
And Jack, I'll see you tomorrow with our big Ali Frazier #1, where the rivalry starts and boxing changes for the rest of history. So we'll see you tomorrow, folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 to 10 a.m. for our big boxing show. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us today. Enjoy your